going to come up on here and talk about something. You should keep your eyes and the third eye, first eye, the center eye, whatever eye you want to call it, a pineal gland, pineal eye. Sometimes they call it the epiphysis. That's the official scientific term. You know what I'm saying, for the, your little pineal gland and right here and whatnot. But what's going on, man? It's Alex Will 64. Um, I don't know what to tell you. I'm kind of just doing a free for all. I would like to be a little bit more scheduled and more consistent with the videos and stuff that I put up on here. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I'm just going by what flows. You know what I'm saying? Whatever comes to mind. Or I just pick something from my Instagram and just elaborate on it in a video form or whatever. um, so today or tonight, I want to discuss something known as a crossover and dealing with the cross and how this relates to Hebrew, not Jewish mysticism. Hebrew, Ebre. We're going to break all that down today because there's a lot of confusion, and it should be. I'm not saying that there should not be, because that's what keeps certain people from getting into the real deal when it comes to this Hebrew or Jewish type of thing. Um, because a lot of people, you out there, you may be familiar with the Kabbalah or whatever. There is, when people are doing magic or they're doing things with the Kabbalah and the Sephiroth and all this type of stuff, they really don't maximize the potential of that type of thing. They usually only deal with like some surface level thing when it comes to that. Some superficial and you know what I'm saying, surface level and superficial. Um, if you really knew what the Hebrew was all about and what that really is talking about, um, it would turn off a lot of people, because you have to understand that when we talk about crossover, so the title of this video is going to be the Allen Iverson. I know you heard of Allen Iverson. He popularized cornrows. He had a few sneakers out. You know what I'm saying? He's really the first of his kind in you know what I'm saying, the NBA. You know about Allen Iverson. I miss that guy. He should come back, and he don't have to come in the spotlight. I ain't gonna say that. If you don't want to be in American mainstream media, nothing like that, you don't have to do that. But you remember Allen Iverson, right? I remember Allen Iverson used to get his braids done, his cornrows done, while at the game. His mom or whoever would do his braids, like, tighten his braids up or whatever. That was new. You know what I'm saying? You had the Latrell Sprewell. He also had the braids too, but not quite like Allen Iverson. But what we're gonna do, say, because this is Alex Will's Eat the Realist holography thing, we're gonna take that name and we're gonna flip it and say Allen IVRI-Son and the Hebrew crossover. So Allen Iverson had the crossover with the ball or whatever. When he was balling out there, balling. Um, we're gonna say IVRI-Son instead of Iverson. And what we're saying when we say IVRI-Son, we're taking Hebrew alphabet and we're doing the etymology on what it means to be Hebrew and what Hebrew actually is. So if you take Hebrew and take it all the way back to the beginning, you'll come up with the alphabet, which if you transliterate um, the four letters that Hebrew is based on in the alphabet, you get IVRI, which is Ivry or Ivory or however you want to pronounce that. But that word Ivry, IVRI, over time becomes what is known as Hebrew. And you can do the etymology on this if you want to. You can study this. Go to Etym Online or Wiktionary, whatever etymological dictionary you got, and you will see that it comes from Ivry. And this is where, because the V and the B are often, especially when it comes to Hebrew, they're interchangeable. So it becomes Ibri, then Eber, then Hebrew, then Hebrew. So, because people don't understand what Hebrew actually is. You know what I'm saying? They think it's this modern day Jewish thing that they see, you know, these Eastern European or these Hasidic or Ashkenazi Jews, where it's like, nah, it's beyond that. We're going beyond mundane religi, ethnic, ethno-religic, or excuse me, ethno, how do you say it? Ethno-religious identification. So if we were just going by the ethno-religious identification, it would just be who they say the Jews are today. Just you know, European white people that, you know what I'm saying, they eat kosher, and you know what I'm saying, they have Passover, and they have a yarmulke on the top of their head, top of their dome piece. They got a yarmulke. They got the dreidel, the Hanukkah holiday around Christmas. That you think that's the Jew, and I'm not going to sit here and deny them. If they want to claim that name, let them claim it. But we need to deal with the history of it and why it's important in terms of alchemy. Because I am an alchemist and I'm a practicing alchemist. I do alchemical things, and people don't realize the special relationship between Hebrew and alchemy. And actually, I got my book over there, and I've mentioned this book before, The Jewish Alchemist by Raphael Patai. It came out like the mid 90s, like 94. And it's a very comprehensive compendium and an explanation to the best of the author's ability to explain and understand, like understand and explain the connection between alchemy, which you know is alchemy, and its relationship to not Jewish, Hebrew. It should really be the Hebrew alchemist instead of the Jewish alchemist. Because when you say Jewish, again, it people immediately think of the European ethno-religious group out here, you know, the Anti-Defamation League and the anti-Semitist people. Not that they're anti-Semitic, but the whole thing of them, you know, if you say anything about Jewish people, they're always going to cry anti-Semitism. We're going to get into that too. We're talking about Hebrew again. We're talking about the start of what this actually is. So if you go into Hebrew, again, I always start with the etymology when it comes to these things. Got to deal with the etymology. Etymology reveals so much. So when I was talking about Ivri, IVRI, and how that relates to the Hebrew alphabet or whatever, you know, it matches up in the Hebrew alphabet, like those letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the precursor to the word alphabet. You know what I'm saying? So Ivri literally means crossover, crossing, a cross. You're crossing something, you're crossing over something, you're crossing into something. So why would you name a people or a person Ivri or Ibre? Because that's another way of saying Ivri, Ibre, which again goes into Eber, Hebrew, Arabu, Hebrew. Now, what a lot of people don't understand what Hebrew is, a Hebrew is actually someone who has crossed over. Now, we have to understand what crossing over actually is. Where else do you find this word or this term of crossing something or crossing over into something? Crossroads, right? See you at the crossroads so you don't get lonely. See you at the crossroads. I'm gonna miss everybody. I'm gonna miss everybody. I used to know the whole song when I was a little jit. When you know the song first came out in the '90s, and my cousin would like, you know, have me around him, and then he'll go around his friends and be like, "Yo, Alex, spit that Bone Thugs," you know, just to, you know, say impress his friends. Like I was just like a little 7 or 8 year old kid. He was like 15 or whatever. But Hebrew is literally dealing with something dealing with crosses or crossing. So what does crossing have to do with Jews and Hebrews and all that stuff? Well, when you look at it from an alchemical perspective, the purpose of alchemy, especially one of the operations, is crossing over. So if you're doing anything less than crossing over, you're not really maximizing your potential, baby, when you deal with alchemy. So in alchemy, yeah, you can sit here and try to convert one element to another, or you know, come up with tinctures and potions and spells, and you know, The whole thing of trying to get the philosopher's stone and all this stuff. But what it's really talking about, without revealing too much, is it's a crossover. When you're in alchemy, aim for a crossing over. Aim for the crossover. Now, what are we crossing over into? Again, I just revealed a clue about that. If you listen to the song "The Crossroads" by Bone Thugs and Harmony, what is that song about? You didn't even know we was about to get into that, did you? We talking about Hebrews and Jewish stuff, and we now talk about Bone Thugs. What are they? What's in the song? What is the song talking about? Death. They talking about they dead homies, cuz. You know what I'm saying? I got blue on, but I'm not a crip. Don't put me in that lane. I'm not a crip. Um, they talking about dead family members, dead homies. I miss my Uncle Charles, y'all. Like they talking about death. So when you're talking about a crossover, you're talking about crossing over into death, literally. So if you're afraid to die, you're afraid of death, then this discussion might not be for you. You may want to wait till you get some bravery when it comes encourage about death before you get into this. But that's literally what's being talked about. Now, this ain't too much of a secret. You can also go into like the Greco-Roman mythology, where it's talking about the cross rivers, the crossing rivers. Like for example, the river Styx and Lecce and all these other names of these rivers, which deal with rivers going into the realm of the dead or Hades. And you know about Charon, who is the ferryman that delivers or ships over or transports the souls of the dead based on Greco-Roman mythology, and like transporting the souls from the dead soul or the dead people, the souls from Earth to Hades or the realm of the dead. So Charon is that ferryman that you give that obelisk coin to. You give him a couple coin or a coin, and that's your passageway from the living realm to the realm of the dead or the afterlife. Now, I know this concept is well beyond Greco-Roman mythology because you can go into like, the whole ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt where, they dealing with the duat and the sun bark or the sun boat where the dead king crosses over into the afterlife or the duat from the realm of the living into the realm of the dead. So, what is a Hebrew in its most core sense is someone who crossed over and can cross back over to the living. Do you understand what Hebrew is now? It's right there in the actually right there in the etymology of Hebrew. Again, go back into the etymology. IVRI, Ivri, Ebre, Eber, Arabu, Hebrew, cross. Ivri is literally means cross. So the Hebrew people are people who deal with the crossing over. If you are not someone who knows or has gone through the crossover, is preparing for that crossing over, you are not a Hebrew. You may have the potential of Hebrew, but until you do the crossing over, you are not a Hebrew. Not in its sense. And this is something I talked about in videos that I took down from my page, but I'll mention it here, is we can simplify this by dealing with the whole caterpillar, butterfly, cocoon thing. Now, let me ask you a question. You see a caterpillar. It has the potential to be a butterfly if it goes through the cocoon, chrysalis, pupae stage. But do you call a caterpillar a butterfly that has not gone through that stage? I would never sit here and say, "Oh, this caterpillar is a butterfly." No, that caterpillar never went through the cocoon stage. So though it has the potential to be a butterfly, it never crossed over into that. It never went into its cocoon chrysalis, its second egg stage. Because you gotta understand, like when you deal with a butterfly and it goes into a cocoon, that cocoon is literally it's an egg. So it deals with that concept of going back to birth and being reborn. So when you deal with the Hebrew in the alchemy, that's exactly, something to look into. That's what's happening. You're crossing over. Because what is birth and what is death? Because a lot of people say life and death are opposites, when in reality, birth and death are actually the opposites. And life is the opposite of anti-life, or excuse me, afterlife. The duat. Those are opposites. So birth and death are opposites. But why, how are they the same? What's similar both to birth and death? You cross over into the realm of the dead to get to the living, and then you cross over from the world of the living to get to the dead. And what are the crossways? Like, what are the passageways? Birth and death. See, a lot of people don't understand. Like, you think you're going to the afterlife. You were already there before you got here. You came from the afterlife to be born. And from that entrance comes your exit. This is why when I'm on Instagram, I'm always dealing with the phrase, your entrance ensures your exit, meaning that you being born here ensures that you will die. Now, I don't mean to be morbid. You know what I'm saying? Like morbidity is something that is actually a science rather than a feeling of dread. So it's a crossover. So when you're born, you're crossing over from the world beyond this one into this physical dimension. And then when you die, you're crossing over, you know what I'm saying, into the realm of the dead again, or the world, the afterlife. And the thing that most people are caught up in is that cycle of doing this whole thing over and over and over again. They're born, they die. They're reborn, they die. They're reborn, they die. And it's always the same thing in each incarnation. So there's no change in that. Like, you still come here as this human identity in each incarnation. So you enter through one crossover, which is birth, and then you leave through another crossover, which is death. So when we go back to Hebrew, Hebrew is someone who knows this science. Not just someone who just dies and comes back to be born and then die again. No. You're talking about someone who has mastered this science of crossing over into both worlds. That's the Hebrew. And the Hebrew is someone or something that has mastered birth and death. They are masters of crossing over. So how am I call you a Hebrew and you haven't done any of that work? You haven't done any of that science. You haven't done any of that discipline. At best, you are a Hebrew in potential. You're a potential Hebrew, just like a caterpillar is a potential butterfly. But until you go through the crossover stage, you are not the Hebrew. Now, this brings me into my next point of understanding the occult and esoteric side of understanding what Hebrew is. So, for example, you have a lot of terms that are actually of the occult or esoteric, but they have borrowed these terms for um, mundane use. You see what I'm saying? Like, for example, Earth, the word Earth. You think Earth is just the planet. No, Earth is the physical dimension all in itself. So if you have a planet that says that they call it Saturn or Mars, and you have people going there physically, they're still Earth. Earth is esoteric term for the physical realm in and of itself. So they borrowed that term, Earth, and then used it to name the actual the planet. But no, it's dealing with all things that are physical. Your body, this house, you know what I'm saying, the ground, the clouds in the sky, the water, you know what I'm saying? Anything that it can be deemed physical phenomena is considered Earth, not just the planet. So this whole debate about, flat Earth and round Earth, it makes no difference to me. It's all Earth on the esoteric or occult side of things. So in the same way, they took the word Hebrew, you know what I'm saying? And now you think it's just dealing with some ethno-religious people. And then you also have, you know, the Hebrew Israelites who they mean well, but they don't really like they don't understand the occult alchemical significance of Hebrew and then Israelite. Because you know, if you break down Israel, we know about it being Isis, Ra, and then El. You know what I'm saying? These deities. That is an occult term. So an Israelite is someone who is actually initiated into the so-called mysteries. Has nothing to do with a cultural background or a cultural ethnicity. Just based on the makeup of the word Israel, Isis, Ra, El. That's a occult term, and it's reserved for those who are initiated into that science. You see what I'm saying? So why do they call you a Hebrew in in the occult? It's because you crossed over. If you did not go through that occult crossover, you are not a Hebrew. You heard it from me. You want to challenge me on it? Be my guest. You want to tell somebody and they want to challenge me on it? Well, tell them to bring their behind on over here so we can have a discussion. Even with the so-called Star of David is actually a symbol of the crossover. They even have something within the whole, you know, modern day Jewish culture called the Passover. I forgot which day or days of the year. I forgot. I gotta look that up. If you know it, put it in the comment section. But because it's something I'll research after I'm done speaking here. But the Passover crossover, their exodus out of Egypt. You really think that's talking about a group of regular humans that left out of ancient Egypt and no, that's a cult. That's an occult term. That's an occult action. Because many of y'all think that Egypt, see, this is the mundane thing about Egypt. You think it's that landmass over there in Africa. No, that landmass in Africa is named after Egypt. What is the true Egypt? This is an occult term. Egypt is the physical world. It's another way of saying earth. So as long as you're operating in the physical, you are in Egypt. But to be more specific, when they talk about tying lower and upper Egypt, they're really talking about higher and lower self. So upper Egypt is really talking about the heavens or the afterlife. So the science is you being in both worlds, not you tying this southern piece of land with this northern piece of land. That's for the mundane. That's for the exoteric. That's for the plebeian, the uninitiated. Do you see what I'm saying? So Egypt is another term for earth or the physical realm. So if you look at it that way, what it's talking about is the pharaoh or the king, the dead king. If we're talking about, you know, pyramid texts and stuff like that, the process is him tying or her tying herself into both realms instead of being in one or focused on one. They live in both realms. They live in the life and the afterlife at the same time. They're conscious of both sides, as opposed to just a regular human who's just focused on earth and then just some spirit that's just focused on the afterlife. No, you are both. You can walk between two worlds. It's even going in more into the Kabbalah where you're dealing with Boaz and Yakin, or however you want to pronounce it. The two pillars and then that middle pillar. Both of these pillars represent life and afterlife, life and death, or life in the realm of the dead. So you, as an alchemist, you're tying those together. You're bringing them, instead of them being separate, you're tying them together. You're making them one. You're resolving the paradox between life and afterlife, or before life. Because again, when you came, birth was a crossover. Death is a crossover. You see what I'm saying? So going back to the whole thing about Hebrew, that's who that was. It's an initiate who crossed over. Now, if you are familiar with the whole Black Greek letter organizations in college, like the whole Divine Nine and all that, they have this whole thing about crossing the burning sands. What do you think they're really talking about? Because what happens, like, let's say if you're trying to be an alpha or an AKA, like, you know what I'm saying? For those of you that understand this whole college Greek letter organization thing, I always wanted to be an alpha. Like when I was in college, I was going to that 4-year college. I wanted to be an alpha, but I never pursued it because I thought, uh, I don't think these individuals really understand the science of what they're dealing with, and I don't want to be associated with people who don't understand this science of crossing over. And plus, I had I had my son. I had other responsibilities to be pledging with them. But the fact remains, the whole thing about you crossing the burning sands is an occult initiate understanding, and it's occult initiate procedure. So you know that, like for example, if you're an alpha in college, that's what you're pledging. You have to cross the burning sands to become officially a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Same thing with the other fraternities and sororities. You have to cross the burning sands. That is one of the oldest occult understandings, if you know what that's really talking about. It's a crossover. And the danger of this is that you have to survive the crossover. So, do you actually know the science of birth, life, and death? This is what this whole initiation thing is about. So, there's a whole movement of people out here in the occult who say, "Oh, I don't need to be initiated into anything." And I understand that sentiment because we're not talking about a cultural initiation. Like, for example, if you're getting into Ifa or you're getting into voodoo or, you know, Palo and all that stuff, that's a cultural type of initiation where you're getting initiated into that culture or that priesthood. We're not dealing with priesthood stuff over here. This has nothing to do with you being a priest or getting into a priesthood when it comes to Hebrew crossing over. Let me make that distinction. Because what are you doing if you're getting initiated into Ifa or the whole voodoo thing? Did you really go through a crossover? Like, did you really go through like a real death? Like, did you really experience that? Like, was you disciplined in that whole process? You know what I'm saying? Did you go through, like, did you learn about alchemy and all this stuff in order to fulfill that process of crossing over? No. You just got into a cultural initiation into that culture. Some of y'all don't even have all that Nigerian blood in you, but you got so enraptured in or got caught up in African spirituality that you thought you was getting back to your African roots by going into the whole thing of Ifa or the Congo thing or whatever. But that's not what the crossover is. So I'm not interested in becoming a priest in their priesthoods. No. This is about you going through a pre-genesis or regeneration process. And you don't have to be Nigerian or Khan or Congo or Somalian or Native American or um, Indian or Chinese to do that. It's all whoever. If you was born here, you qualify for a crossover. But it's all about who can survive and who could be disciplined enough to actually go through the process. So it has nothing to do with culture. Which brings me back to the word Hebrew. People think Hebrew is a land or an ethnicity, and it's not. Not in its truest sense. So when I say Hebrew, why are you thinking of Israel? Like the physical landmass that is called Israel. No. Hebrew has no cultural um um how can I say this? It has no cultural root. It's not culture. It's not an earthly thing. You see what I'm saying? It's not based in that. So that means you can be from wherever you are on the earth in order to go through this process. Has nothing to do with you being any type of ethnicity. Because the fact that you were in a woman's womb, you were born out of her vagina, or you was cut out of her stomach if it was a cesarean section, and you came with a placenta, and that umbilical cord to that placenta was cut. That's the pre-qualification for you of going through this process. So does that mean you have to be Nigerian or Akan or Native American or Spanish? No. When you're doing the whole thing with the Akan, the Nanasom, or you're doing the thing with the Nigerian and the Ifa, that's a requirement for you to be that. You gotta be Nigerian. Like, why would you want to be Ifa if you don't have any Nigerian blood? Or be in the Akan and you don't have no Ghanaian blood? The Hebrew thing is beyond earth. It has nothing to do with a culture. You crossed over from the world beyond into this earth through birth, and so you shall leave and cross over into death, or excuse me, into the realm of the dead or afterlife through the process of death. But this is why you're supposed to be studying death, if you really are tired of the human experience. And that's only if you're tired of it, because if you're not, that means there's no reason for you to be initiated into this science. You need to remain human until you're ready to do it. So the Hebrew, again, is someone or that being who has did this whole crossover process. So it's just like saying an adept, because if you know the word adept, that's someone who has become an initiate and has advanced to the higher degrees of this initiation. That's what the Hebrew is. So do you think that's you have to go somewhere like to Africa to do that? No. You got to go to South America or somewhere in the Caribbean to do that? No. You can do this in Antarctica, fool. So yeah, I'm not with the whole thing of, doing some sort of initiation within a culture. No. But when the true initiation, and like I said in my last video, go watch that video where I get into like, some basics about initiation itself. Initiation has that type of initiation has no cultural uh, home. But you see here in these times now, like I said, you have these Jewish people who have claimed this whole Jewish thing, and they think they are the chosen people. That has nothing to do with a culture. They made it a cultural thing, and it's not. And you'll find that none of them have even gone through a actual crossover process. They're just Jewish and Hebrew, or I guess if they want to claim Hebrew, in name only. Now, the whole word Jewish or Jew comes from the whole Jehuda and Yehuda and Yehud, and it goes all the way back to the Kemet thing dealing with Jehudi or Thoth or Thoth, whatever you want to pronounce it. You see what I'm saying? It's even in some of these Jewish people call themselves Yehuda. Like some of their first names be Yehuda. Just like this one author, Yehuda Berg, who wrote the Energy of Hebrew Letters. It's a good book you should get if you want to learn about the I guess the magic or it's literally in the title, the energy of the Hebrew letters, like the Hebrew alphabet, like the science behind the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. His name was Yehuda Berg. So if you trace Yehuda back and do the etymology on it, it's talking about the netter or the god Jehudi or Thoth or Thoth. Now, what are the other names of this deity that you may know and you have never made the connection? Hermes Trismegistus, So when you're talking about hermetic science or hermetic alchemy or hermetic magic, you're actually talking about magic that is attributed to Jehudi or Thoth. So the whole Mercury or Hermes, you know what I'm saying, Hermes or however you want to say it. Those the deities of those Greco-Roman deities that are dealing with messenger, like the god of messages and stuff like that. Enoch is another name for Jehudi. Yes. Moses is another name for Jehuti. So if you look at the legend of Moses in the Bible, that whole thing is, you know what I'm saying, what alchemy is based on, especially when you're talking about Jewish alchemy. It's all based on what Moses did, or Moshe or Messiah, however you want to, you know, whatever term you want to use, or style of the name you want to use. And each of these names are always associated with alchemy because alchemy itself is said to be, you know what I'm saying, if you read books like the Jewish Alchemists, they tell you in there that that Egyptian god Thoth with the ibis bird as a head is the patron or the creator of alchemy. So though the names changed to Moses or Hermes Trismegistus or Enoch, you're still dealing with the same entity, the creator and progenitor of alchemy. So if you're saying that you're a Jew or you're a Jewish person, you whether you know it or not, you're saying that you are a adherent or an initiate of Moses or Jehudi. Jehudi, Tehudi, Yehuda, Jehuda, Jew, Judah, Judaism, Judah. So when people talk about the lions of the tribe of Judah, you're talking about the actual Hebrew initiate.